My name is Andrew, and I'm going to talk about the evaluation reporting part of grants with a focus on the Community Foundation, of course, but also hoping it can be an interactive session and that we can answer whatever questions you might have and how they apply to other settings. So, as a little bit about who I am, I'm not an employee of the Community Foundation. I work for Tim & Newberry Consulting, and we are people who do evaluations for folks and also often help people set up evaluation sort of templates and reporting systems. And so we help to design the reporting templates that the Community Foundation uses for evaluation, and we've done training and coaching with people who've been completing those grant forms for a couple of years now, and we've been incorporating that feedback. So if I make observations, I guess, about how I think evaluation should work, they're sort of my observations doing this kind of work, but I do know the Community Foundation system pretty well and can answer questions about that too. I saw Chelsea run up here and run back again. Is it working now?
Nope.
No, it's not working. Okay. How am I doing though just by talking loud? Am I doing okay? All right. Awesome. So I've got a bit of prepared content that I will share, and I know it's a large room, and that makes it hard to get really informal about conversation. But I hope we can, and I hope you guys will ask questions. And I want to make a few opening comments about why the evaluation is becoming so important to the Community Foundation and why it's becoming important in grant making generally. And I think the simple answer is that increasingly grant-making organizations, whether they're governments, whether they're community foundations, United Ways, whatever, and you all know this, are needing to demonstrate on out to their audiences that they've invested in a way that is impactful, in a way that is making a difference. And there's a lot of research on the fact that donors and taxpayers are looking for that from the charitable sector, a sense that not did we just sort of have goodwill or did we have good intentions, but in fact we invested in a way that truly made a difference. And I think that's the shift in mindset. I think a lot of us grew up in an era when the way to communicate about your charitable work was to say, we do good work. We give something back to the community. We address the issues that matter. We're out there on the trying our best kind of messaging used to be important. But I think increasingly it's that, look, we've considered the options and we are doing something that we believe has the best chance of making a difference, of really leading to change in the world. And I think that people like the Community Foundation are saying we want to make investments in folks that can make a measurable difference, that can show that something has changed as a result. Now, I'm not new at this. I know that there are a lot of challenges and a lot of concerns that come along with that mindset. And I think that as a sector, we're only beginning to kind of work those through and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. There he is. Thank you. How's it? That better? Okay. Great. Whenever I'm on a stage this big, I feel bad that I didn't plan any choreography or anything. I feel like it's a missed opportunity with all this space up here. But so this can get tricky, right? It's a nice idea in principle that we would demonstrate that we're making a difference, and I think I haven't met anybody who feels like that's not a good idea in principle, and I think most people would like to be able to show that their work has made a difference. And I think most people, we're not in this field because we're getting rich or because of all the prestige. We're in this field because we're committed to making a difference on social issues, and so that's not a tough sell. But I think where the devil's in the details sometimes, right? So sometimes there are different expectations across funders, right? So you end up having to do this measurement thing in one way on one day and then in a totally different way for another funder. And not only are they different, but sometimes they're quite rigid, right? So funders don't certain funders, and they vary quite a bit, don't allow a lot of flexibility in what it is they want you to measure. And so it's hard to create one system that's sort of truly measuring what matters in your work. You end up having to create systems for others. Lack of resources, of course, right? I mean, we never talk about how long does it take, how much time does it take, how much expertise does it take to do this measurement thing. And for a small organization or a new organization, are the expectations, reasonable given the resources and given the expertise? That's a challenge, I think, in doing this kind of thing. And connected to that, I think, is sometimes the questions that are asked are sometimes unrealistic. You know, you're supposed to be able to measure something like, you know, we've reduced poverty, or we've ended racism, or something like that. Or you're expected to sort of, you know, follow up the people that you serve for months and months after they leave your program. You know, those kinds. So sometimes there's unrealistic expectations about it. This one I'm particularly sort of passionate about is the idea that there's pressure to show positive results. You know, like in an ideal world for me, when we say, you know, we want to invest for impact, I don't think that should mean we invest in sure things that have guaranteed us that change will happen. I think what that should mean is we invest in organizations that are committed to ongoing learning about whether or not they're making an impact. Does that distinction make sense? So it's about the attempt, right? It's that we're going to look, we're going to measure, we're going to learn. It's not that we promise that this many people will absolutely, without question, you know, graduate from high school as a result of things. And I think that's an important distinction. And I think when there is pressure to show positive results, whether it's intentional on the part of the funder or whether it's the subtext of the funder is that we want to give to people who show positive results, when you think about it, you know, you're undercutting the whole principle of evaluation right out of the gate. Right? Like if evaluation isn't a process that allows us to learn from our mistakes, it is a rationalization and justification exercise. Right? So unless evaluation has the opportunity for us to learn and to say, no, it didn't work, and here's why, and here's what we're going to do differently, then that's, I think, when it turns into bureaucracy. And I think sometimes, too, there's this challenge around, one of the challenges is around there isn't a good opportunity to sort of say, hey, well, let's do the kind of evaluation that's going to be useful to you and also useful to me. You know, sometimes it's drop down, right? And you sort of have to reply to a system where the questions have already been decided and the methods have already been decided and you don't have a lot of input. And one of the things we've been finding in some of our work recently, we've been doing some stuff with the Ontario Nonprofit Network around this. And, you know, we found evaluation isn't always frustrating for nonprofits. It's frustrating when there's a poor match between how much risk you're supposed to take and how much control you have over what's going to happen, right? So if it's an evaluation where, you know, you're going to put in a lot of time and energy, but you also have quite a lot of input into what the evaluation is going to address and how it's going to work and whether it's going to be useful, that may be a lot of work for you, but it's going to produce something worthwhile, right? So you're up in that sort of top right corner, right? High investment, high risk maybe for you, but also high return, high control. And similarly, if it's low and low, you might think, yeah, you know what, I don't know, some funder wants us to gather this data. It's not that hard for us to gather this data. I'm not all that interested in it, but it doesn't cost us much. You know, fine. You know, we have a good partnership. We're perfectly happy to share that data on out. But where it gets stressful, I think, is when high risk and responsibility, low control. Right? So you're expected to put a lot of time into it. You're going to be judged on the basis of it, but you haven't had a lot of say in how it gets done. And I think that particular corner is where a lot of the frustration arises. Is that true? Yeah. So that's just a few kind of opening comments, I suppose, about this topic we're talking about here. And so we're going to move on now to saying some more practical things about how do you do a good job of completing the evaluation reports for funders. And this is that one slide that I shared with you, and I kind of wanted to make 4 points around it. And they're more general points, but I'll talk about how they apply more specifically as we go along. So, you know, a key tip, I think, is focus, right? Don't try to measure too much. Don't try to report on too much. Another key tip is turning outward. Demonstrate, don't try to show that you're the solution to every problem. Try to show, look, we fit in. You know, we make a distinctive contribution along with others. Share. You know, be willing to admit to mistakes. Be willing to tell more of the story. Don't take a defensive stance where you only share what you think makes you look good. And engage. You know, expect of others this same philosophy as far as your own. So, when focus, talk about a small number of outcomes that are in your wheelhouse. Talk about them consistently. And use the same language that others in your community use. Right? So make it clear what it is you're trying to change. You know, I think some of us, because the funders rules are different and trends change year after year, you find yourself on Tuesday acting like you're an employment program, and then on Thursday acting like you're a recreation program because that's what somebody wants to hear. You know, and I think that's,
maybe in the short term feels like the right thing to do, but I think succeeding in reporting, it involves kind of trying to stay on message and trying to kind of have consistent, focused communication about what it is you're trying to do and why that's important. And I think that the Community Foundation has given you a number of kind of cues, I guess, around what they're looking for in that way, right, around focus. So they talk about, projects that are smart and projects that are caring. And you've seen that language before. I won't go into it a lot. That's on their website too, right? That they're based on solid understanding of community issues. They devote significant energy to the building blocks of belonging. This varies a little bit depending on which stream you're applying to, of course. Capable of increasing our understanding of the issues. That's what they mean by SMART grants. I will put all these slides out through an email and PDF form. I'm skipping through these quickly because this is sort of background information that I think is available elsewhere. But so there are cues out there, I guess, as to how to communicate your focus. And one of the things that's really helpful is this kind of thing, where what we actually did here is within belonging, we sort of broke out, well, what would a particular grant say in order to show how it contributes to this great big idea of belonging, right? So we said, well, there's probably 4 more specific outcomes that point towards belonging, whether it's relationship building, self-growth, helping of others, or collaborating. And then you can see within relationship building, you could even come up with even more specific outcomes, right? So that relationships building, well, maybe our grant is helping participants form healthier relationships with friends and family. Maybe it's helping them make new social connections. Maybe it's just helping them know more about other people in their environment so that they maybe feel more comfortable going up and talking to them. And maybe it's about making people feel more accepted, less isolated, less like an outsider. And so I think by unpacking this kind of thing, you can say, yeah, you don't have to say in your evaluation report, yes, we're about belonging, here's the data that shows that we've increased belonging. You can be kind of more precise and more focused in sort of picking the thread that best captures the distinctive contribution that you are making to belonging. And I think that's one of the big secrets in doing a good job of reporting outcomes. Does that make sense? Any questions about that part of things? And again, I notice people taking notes, and I will send that around. It's a lot of content on one slide, but I think you get the principle. Okay. So the second point I wanted to make was this notion of sort of turning outward, right? Show that you understand your context. Show that you understand in the way that you report on your grant, show that you understand how you fit in, how your work is supported by the work of others, and how you kind of set the stage for others to succeed. And I think a lot of that has to do with, in your reporting, demonstrating that by saying, look, we spoke to community members. You know, we sought their feedback about whether we were doing something distinctive and worthwhile. You know, we read vital signs, and and some of the themes that are in vital signs, they came up in our work too, and so we really feel like we're connecting there. We're not just doing work that we believe to be important. We are responding to a call from the community. We are responding to something that others have said is important in the work that we're doing. And of course, there's lots of other great sources locally, whether it's the region or whether it's the Social Planning Council or other groups that do excellent research locally that you can kind of connect to sort of try to make that point, to try to show how it. Sometimes it's letters of support from partners, that kind of thing, that really help to show the niche. The third point I want to make, and this is maybe a bit more detailed here, is that I think a principle is to be willing to share. I think sometimes nonprofits believe that when funders are looking at their reports, they're making 2 piles. The pile of people who had good results and the pile of people who had bad results. And I think it's fair, and I've been at those tables quite often, right? Where we're flipping through all the reports from all the agencies, and I've watched the volunteers and read them over. And if there are 2 piles, I don't think those are the 2 piles. I think the 2 piles are grants that seem like they are committed to learning and growth, and grants that seem sort of complacent, seem like they think they know it all already, and they're not really willing to sort of grow and change. I think those are the two piles when it comes to reviewing evaluation. And so I think if there's things that you can do to show that you are committed to ongoing feedback, show that you really sort of put yourself out there and ask the question, and show that you've learned from your evaluation you're doing something differently because of it, I think that's smart. I think that's a good way to position yourself strategically. And we've tried, I think, with the kiddo, I mean, the big trick, of course, is it has to be safe, right? Like, if you're going to share your mistakes, you got to feel like that's not going to be used against you. That's not going to reduce your chances of getting a grant next time around, or it's not going to sort of be, you know, I don't know, used by one of the other agencies in town to compete with you or something like that, right? You have to, I think, as a foundation, we have to make sure that we've created a space in which it is safe and rewarding to do that kind of thing. So I think the way the Community Foundation has tried to do that is to try to make you know, a strong emphasis on those outcomes linked to belonging, you know, to sort of say, hey, look, here's what we're interested in. This is the kind of information that we as a foundation would find most useful, you know, as we go out to our donors and try to get more resources for the future. So I think they've tried to be upfront about what kinds of information is most useful. We've tried to create a simple, flexible approach, just like Chelsea said about the application. I love that they measure how many hours people are putting into the application, and it's still high, but it's, you know, they're trying to bring it down. And I think we would say the same thing about the evaluation template. We're trying to make it less complicated, less involved, you know, quicker to get to the interesting parts, that kind of thing. We've made it clear that we are interested in numbers, but we're also interested in stories, and that we're interested in how those things fit together. So it isn't just about, you know, filling in squares. It's about speaking to why the data that's in those squares matters or is important, or what you want to say about it. And we've tried to make it clear in the report that we're interested in the impact, of course. We're interested in the data that shows whether, in fact, people's, you know, lives have changed or communities' processes have changed. Clearly, we're interested in that. But we're equally interested in lessons learned and challenges faced. And I remember there was a great example of that a couple of years ago at the Community Foundation, where I happened to be flipping through, and there were 5 or 6 grants over the course of 3 or 4 years that had all been trying to take programming into schools. And they had all come up against the same challenges, because that's not easy, right? It takes quite a while to get programming into schools. And they'd also learned the same things. And at the foundation table, we were like, okay, so we've done that 5 or 6 times now. That data's come in. We should be synthesizing that data and sharing it back out so that the next round of grant applicants can benefit from that, right? That here's the kind of things that you need to do if you want to form a partnership with a school and you want to do programming in the schools, you know. So we want to get those lessons, because that's very helpful, of course, right? Even if those grants weren't particularly impactful, they were very valuable because they leave us collectively further ahead in our understanding about how we intervene. So the form that takes in the report to the Community Foundation, it looks like this. So there's an output page, right? How many people were we going to serve? Who were those people? You know, how did it really go on the ground? Did we serve the number of people we thought we would? And what are the comments about that? And sometimes, you know, maybe there's groups of people or outputs that we hadn't thought of originally, and the foundation's interested in those too. You know, we thought we would get to 500 students, and we only got to 400 students. But you know what? We also reached, you know, 50 parents, and we hadn't even been expecting that kind of thing. And then on the outcome side of things, we've tried to sort of be pretty plain language and specific about what we're looking for. You know, so that what were the outcomes you had in your proposal, and who were the people you were going to help? What's the explanation of that outcome? So, you know, how were they expected to benefit? How did you gather information about that? And what impact did you learn? And what were the findings? What's the evidence that shows the progress the project has made towards achievement of the outcome objectives? Using the indicators and the measurement strategies from that last column, you know, what can you say about what's happened and the difference that you've made? And again, here we have room for what was expected, but also room about for what was unexpected. You know, what happened that you didn't know would happen. And then there's a bunch of open-ended questions that come after that. Expand on your findings. What's important about the information in the table? What's important that's not explained in the table? What does it say about your progress towards those bigger picture outcomes that maybe you can't measure directly, but what does it say about your progress towards those bigger picture outcomes? Did it accomplish anything you didn't expect? Were you surprised by what it accomplished or didn't accomplish? Looking back, if you knew what you know now, would you have done the evaluation in any kind of different way? Would you, if someone like you was to do a grant like this in the future, what would your advice to them be, kind of thing? So that's how the template looks for reporting for the Community Foundation. And of course, you guys have seen these types of tables before, and there are lots of sort of challenges people face, like is it, what counts as an outcome versus an output, and where should I put this number, and where do I put the, if my data doesn't quite fall into easy rows and I need a couple paragraphs to explain it, where do I put that, those kinds of things. But I mean, these kind of tables are pretty common. Are there questions you have about being smart and how you fill them out? Or frustrations you have, or would you like to say that there should never be another table like this ever again? Gabrielle?
Yeah, Andrew, I just wondered if you could comment briefly on the difference between the output and outcomes, because I think that's a valid point that a lot of people struggle with, and so if you could just talk a little bit more in depth about what you see in
Sure.
those two things.
So the textbook answer is that an output is a number about how much work you did, right? Whereas an indicator of an outcome is a number that shows that someone's life has changed as a result, right? So like if I was here at this session, if I was to say that 40 people came to my session, that would be an output. If I was to say that, I got a good number of questions, that would be an output. However, if you guys filled out an evaluation form and said, we actually used the strategies that Andrew taught us and found them helpful, that would be an indication that change had happened for you as a result of this work. Now, what gets tricky, though, in my experience, is you guys are experts, right? You guys are content experts in the work that you do. And when you're an expert, you know a lot more about what a particular data point means than I do as an outsider. Right? So what seems to me like an output feels to you like an output. You know what I mean? Like you know your people so well that when you see the early signs that something is happening, like when you say, well, 15 high-risk youths showed up today. And I might say, well, showed up, that's an output, right? That doesn't really say that anything has changed in their lives, that's just an output. But you say, but no. If you did the work that I did, you would know that the youth showing up, in fact, is evidence that something important has really happened. Right? And so to you, it's evidence of change. But to an outside audience, it feels like an output. So I think that's sometimes the challenge, right? And I don't think there's a right answer there, but I think it's about communication, right? It's about giving me the information to appreciate why, in fact, that is evidence that change has happened. Because you know so much that you do shorthand, right? Like you see a couple of points of data and you think, yeah, we know. That means this, and this. And you're probably right. But to an outsider, you have to connect those dots. Does that help? Yeah.
It's interesting because you just said people asking questions would be output, and I would think that's outcome going, people are engaged, right? So
maybe so.
Even again, interpreting what's happening and being able to decide which is it, that's challenging.
Absolutely, and in some ways it comes back to that sort of be focused, right? That earlier point, right? Like, why am I doing this session? Perhaps the reason I'm doing this session is simply to sort of, demystify evaluation and have people feel a little bit more comfortable, right? I'm not really doing this session to change your practices inside your agency. So in some ways it comes back to that, right? Like how I've positioned my outcomes has implications for what counts as good data for those outcomes, right? I think another challenge in this table that people often face is kind of parsing, right? Like you've got lots of data. Some of it is stories, some of it is numbers, and yet you're supposed to sort of fit it into these little boxes, right? So you're supposed to say, look, did we or did we not make change in this one outcome? And you want to say, well, but there's a whole story there, and there's context there, and in a sense we did, and in a sense we didn't. And for some of our people we did, but for some of our people that didn't make sense. So like, it's frustrating sometimes to sort of distill all of what happened into some little bullet points that you can put to say, yes, in fact, that kind of change happened or didn't happen. And I think that, to me, that challenge is, again, it's about messaging, right? It's about, the analogy I sometimes use is I go on a vacation, right? And I come back and I see you, and you say, is that a good place to go on vacation? And I say, oh, you just got to go see for yourself. Like, I can't even explain, you just have to go, right? And really, I'm being very selfish there, right? Like, I'm making no attempt to understand your interests and your vacation plans, and then sort of take from my experience a couple of little nuggets that will actually be useful to you in making the decision you need to make about vacation. I'm being lazy, right? And I think sometimes as nonprofits we do that. Oh, our work is so complex. There's just so much going on. You have to come and see it. I couldn't possibly simplify it down into a couple of things for you. And I think we do, as nonprofits, need to be able to do that work and sort of understand our audience, right? And say what part of that story is going to get traction with them and be useful to them. And I think the Community Foundation's tried to put out there some stuff about what it's interested in. And so that's a place to start, I think. So that's another challenge people have told me about something. Is that something you guys have struggled with? Like you got 10 things you want to say in a little box? Yeah.
Perhaps going along with that, when you have a little box or when you have so many words that you're indicated for the answer, but when there isn't a limitation, sometimes it can be a challenge to know how much information are they actually looking for and how succinct do we need to be in our response. Do you have a way of kind of guiding that? Or
yeah, that's a great question. I think two things I would say. I think less is probably more. I remember I had a prof who said, once gave me a low mark on an essay, and I said, why? And he said, because there's 10 good ideas in this essay. And he said, nobody remembers 10 good ideas, you have to have 3. So I think less is more sometimes, and then maybe it invites a, hey, I'm interested in that. What is that really all about? And he said, well, why don't you come to it? And he gives you the opportunity to tell more later. At the same time, though, I think, and I've got a slide on this later, I think it's perfectly fair for you to ask your funder that, to say, can you give me an example of a well-completed evaluation report that had the right level of detail in it that I can use as an example to follow? Because it's on them, to some degree, I think, to be able to be clear. But that's sort of like, these days in school, right? The teachers will send home a rubric for a big test, and they'll say, to get a level 4, you need to do this, to get a level 3, you need to do that kind of thing. And they never had those when I was a kid. I think those are really helpful, and I think that funders need to kind of do the same thing. They need to tell you that. So maybe that's something the foundation can be better on, is to say how much is enough, and what's what are some guidelines around that. I don't know that we've done that. Which maybe sets us up for my sort of fourth theme, right? Which is, maybe before I go there though, like these follow-up questions, like, what do you think about them? Like, this is the attempt, I think, in some ways, by the Community Foundation to sort of get past the tyranny of the little boxes, right? To say, yes, we're asking about them, but we also want to hear kind of your thoughtful reflections on what those boxes do and do not mean. And when we first created these, I was a bit anxious that I think it's more writing for people, so we're going in the wrong direction in terms of making the form simpler and more streamlined. But on the other hand, I think it gives space for things that people want to say, right? So I don't know, what are your, like, is this asking too much of you, or is this, do you like these questions?
I just find anything that's set up in a table is really frustrating to deal with.
Right.
It's not the questions, it's just, I feel like when I look at it, I'm already being put in a box.
Right. So you like the open-ended
I
opportunity?
like the open-ended opportunity. I do like the changes that have been made to the evaluation. I've always believed it's really important to say what didn't work and why, and what you learned from it. Sometimes those are far more, those grants have far greater positive impact on an organization than the successful ones.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they really do move you forward and make you think differently.
Yep.
But I just find when I'm looking at that table,
Yeah, you're not alone. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, on the actual logistics of the table and going paperless, you have to give us an option to print or save to our computers without, like, that's a huge problem now, is that the boxes don't expand for
Okay.
printing purposes. You can't download it as a PDF, and we have to keep records. And
Yeah.
so, you know, for example, like Kids to Camp, the pre-screen, I couldn't print anything that I wanted. Now, I can cut and paste and put it in my own Word document, whatever, but
Yeah.
we're talking about streamlining it, make sure that if we're going paperless, that the forms are savable and
Yeah.
downloadable.
absolutely. And, you know, that, from the foundation's point of view, it makes it easier for your report back to be aligned with your original application. If
Yes.
you can see it again. If you can't see it, it's hard to sort of,
Totally support paperless, but just make it easy for us to keep a record.
totally, okay, makes sense. In the back there, I don't know.
OTF has a system where you actually can count each organization and then you can go back always and check your applications that you submitted,
Yeah.
previous reports and stuff like that.
So it is possible to do it that way, and it should be easy.
Yeah, I really like the questions. I think that it's important to be able to put a narrative in there. I think it would be, when you see this, you feel like I need to have a really thorough answer for each one of these questions. And you might really want to spend more time on one than the other, but you feel like these questions are there, they each, you know.
Right.
So if it was, you know, sort of a list of questions and an open box to,
Okay, yeah,
I think the best evaluation I ever did was from a foundation that said, you know, in 2 pages, tell us what you did.
yeah,
And so it was so open-ended that we, you know, that I could really pull all of the information we had into a nice narrative to talk about, you know, here's what we really learned from this. And it was kind of the most clear evaluation I feel like I ever had, you know, because there was that room to focus in on what, you know, what your experience really was.
right. I think that's a great point, and make a note of these here so I don't forget. The challenge with that, of course, is that the foundation and many funders are interested in some form of aggregation, right? Like being able to pull together information from multiple grants in order to send out high-level messages about how their work has contributed to the themes that they want to achieve. And I think it's probably fair to say, though, that the funders as a whole in Ontario are not yet very good at doing that. And still sorting out the best ways to do it, right? And the table is an attempt, right? The table is saying, well, if we can get some similar information from a bunch of grantees, the chances of us being able to kind of aggregate it are better than if everybody is totally open-ended and saying it in, you know, in their own way in a language that makes sense to them. But I think just having a strong set of investment priorities with a little more meat on them, like they have now with belonging, might be very helpful. Like you might find that the open-ended answers are easier to aggregate now simply because you all understand belonging in the same way, and maybe that's enough. And I think, you know, we're often in that position, right, of looking at 20 grant reports and trying to help a foundation say what we've learned. And I think there's still a lot that we're learning about how to do that in a way that's no more arduous than necessary for you, but still generates data that is useful, you know, that we've learned from in some way. Yeah.
I like the specific themes because I'm often not delivering the program. So when I'm working on an evaluation with the staff who have delivered that program, their first question is, well, what is it that we need to track? What is it that we need to pay attention to?
Yeah.
So the more specific you can be up front, the easier it makes. It's amazing what gets lost in translation in that conversation.
Very true. And I think, again, it's that sort of, you know, we're all experts in our own little corner of the world, and we all use shorthand. And we aren't necessarily that good at explaining why our vacation was great to somebody else, right? We live in our own little world. So I think that skill set is something that's, I think, hopefully emerging, I think, in this sort of shift in the way that grant making in the nonprofit sector is happening. I think, well, or it needs to in order for this to succeed. I want to say that the fourth principle I think is engagement, right? That if you're trying to apply this in your own work, you know, if you're trying to sort of be open and make mistakes and be clear about focusing on the things that you can contribute to the most kind of thing, I think it's totally fair to sort of expect that same behavior from your funders and from your partners, right? To sort of be able to ask them those questions. Whether the partners happen to be your board members or another agency that's involved and work with you or what have you, right? That I think we need to sort of expect this of one another, whether, or me as an external evaluator maybe, expect the same sort of behavior from me. So there's this question at the end of the form, the foundation is interested in reporting to the community about how its investments have helped to build community belonging. So, kind of owning this, say, hey, we're asking you this stuff for a reason. This is the reason we're asking you for your stuff. We want to use your data in this way. So what are your thoughts about that? Like how would you advise us, to kind of roll up your data in some way? But through some work that we've been doing with the Ontario Nonprofit Network, we've been sort of tinkering with, could we create a set of questions that you might ask, at the beginning of a grant or, of a fund or a round evaluation that might sort of help to level the playing field and create a context where evaluation is more likely to be meaningful, So you might be fair for you to ask a funder, can you tell me more about how you develop these impact goals that you have? Can you point me towards the research that you use or give me a more detailed set of definitions about these concepts? And we've tried at the Community Foundation to do that, but you may still have questions. There may be elements of belonging that you think we should explain better, or we should defend better, do you have examples of the short-term program outcomes that you see as contributions to this goal? Surely you're not expecting us to solve that whole problem. You're expecting us to be one thread of a solution. So, have you unpacked it in that big slide with all the ideas on it that I put up would be one way of trying to answer that question. We know resources are limited. We know that, but can we at least agree that our expectations should be consistent with resources, right? So funder, if you don't want us to put very many of these resources you're giving us into evaluation, well, can we talk about, what you're getting back from us and how, that's going to match the level of resources we're putting into it. So not to say there's a right answer there, but just to have an open conversation about it. Like, can we talk about resources and what we're able to learn and agree, that those things are in alignment. We talked already about, can you provide examples of reports that worked well for you as a funder, and I guess the risk there is always people might try to use the exact same language or something, but I think generally speaking, people could say, oh, okay, great, that's what a B+ paper looks like, or that's what an A- paper looks like, I can aim for that. Once we submit our report, are we going to have a chance to meet with you to talk about it? Is there going to be an opportunity for us to sort of connect about what's been learned here? Because, the boxes on the page aren't going to capture all of it, and we'd love to be able to, you say you want to learn, funder, right? So are we going to have a chance to sit down and talk about it? Can you tell me more about what exactly you want to do with this information? Because a lot of the research on evaluation and when evaluation works well says that if you're clear about who's going to use it and what they're going to use it for, the chances are the evaluation is going to be more focused and useful. So, that's a fair question to ask the funder. Like, I get in general terms what you want the evaluation for, but can you tell me more about, who are you going to be standing in front of? Are you going to have a couple slides, or do you want to use this as a case example, or what's it going to be? So I think that spirit of evaluative thinking can inform your dialogue with your funder as well as your efforts to fill in the report about a particular grant. Is that the sort of, could you do that? Is that the sort of question you could ask, or is it just too risky to start getting all up in it?
I think for some funders you could, others do not.
Right. Any other questions we haven't touched on? We're almost out of time. We're supposed to get to our next small group session by 11:30. So we're supposed to wrap up here at 20 after. But are there other questions people have wanted to ask about evaluation reporting? All right. Well, I'll hang around if you want to ask me one-on-one. I'm not going anywhere. So, but there's no rule that says we can't start a coffee break 3 minutes early. So thank you very much.